In Hinduism, we always believe that life is a full circle. There are always ups and downs.
India, before the British, was the richest nation with the highest GDP in the world. And why did the 100 years of British rule bring it to a dismal low of some 50th ranking or late 30th ranking?
They came to take our trade, our textile, our raw material, even for making cannonball, they needed saltpeter, which came from India.
India was not their property. They had no right to take my property, my idols, my gods.
They went to our public spaces, our sacred spaces of temples, and really violently pulled out these pieces.
In fact, the word loot also is a Hindi word, which has now got into the English dictionary. So, quite tellingly, even the Hindi word loot has been looted into the English lexicon.
Suppose your a neighbor takes important valuables and displays to you and says, I took it from your home. What will you do?
Like if you take an example of a piece of jewelry, sometimes you may think that it needs repair or it's totally broken. You may decide to break it up, remove the gemstones, and actually melt the gold and recast it. And it might be even brighter and better than what it was before.
Sir, we are hearing some voice from there.
We are going to do it. Ready?
Yes, sir.
No.
Yes, sir.
3, 2, 1, go.
Sir, you are welcome to our humble hamlet, Kusampur. We are well-being unit community working hand in hand and shoulder to shoulder.
I see.
Here comes Balu, the ironsmith of our village. He makes the finest pots and pans and the sharpest of weapons, like swords and spears.
Ah, that's quite primitive manual work. You should see our modern manufacturing units in Glasgow and our cotton mills in Manchester.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
It was our wealth which was also our misfortune. Because had we been a poor country, I don't think they would have come here.
Can you tell me what that guy is doing over there?
Sir, our pujari performs worship in our village temple, praying for well-being of all the people, and villagers are seeking blessings from him.
Why can't the blacksmith do the blessings? He's inferior, right?
No, sir, it is not like that.
This is oppression, not harmony. You people have been cheated for centuries. But don't worry though, the East India Company is here to save you from these oppressive social evils and get a better future.
They propagated falsely that India is a land of snake charmers, elephants, crocodiles, and we have to civilize these heathens and pagans. So we have to convert them to Christianity.
Is that so, sir?
Hey, police, stop this nonsense going on in the name of knowledge. Take these children to our mission school. We will take care of these children from now onwards.
One of the main reasons for the success of the East India Company was the disunity among Indians. There were lots of provinces and Rajas and Maharajas who were constantly fighting with each other.
We begin with Warren Hastings, who was an aggressive imperialist who was able to break up the confederacy of the various states who realized the danger of British rule, which was beginning in 1776.
So they thought the British were just yet another player. They probably did not foresee the pernicious effect that these people were bringing in, that it was not just economic, or trade relations that they were looking at. They were looking at political subjugation, which was undermined or not thought through well enough by the local Indian players.
Well, the economic structure of India was certainly destroyed. because India at the time of Emperor Shah Jahan was the 6th richest country in the world. It had, the volume of trade was 1/6 of the world.
We were wealthier than Britain when the British came here. The story begins in 1768 till 1938. These years were the years when the Indian artifacts were stolen from Indian temples, houses, palaces, art centers. They were taken to the British Museum. The entire British Museum is filled with stolen items.
And here we are, right outside British Museum. Trust me, it's gorgeous from the outside, but from the inside, it's quite controversial, as some people might want to call it. So let's head inside and see what are some of the artifacts taken from India that reside here.
I'm Anhad. I live in New Delhi, and I've just recently graduated from National Film and Television School in London. So I was about to move out from London, come back to India. And when I got this opportunity, I thought that was the best way for me to spend my last days in London by going and looking at these museums that had artifacts and cultural pieces of belonging to my own country.
You see, this entire section is filled with South Asian looted artifacts.
Hello. The things I saw there kind of reignited my love for history, and I was literally experiencing history in front of me, and it was a weird mix of emotions that I felt. There was a sense of sadness, there was a sense of pride. The artifacts, just like any piece of furniture that belongs to somebody's house, belongs to that house and should not be looted by some third party and be put on display in some other house or in some other country. And especially made a touristic attraction out of it and monetized.
So there are two ways of thinking, that when they took these artifacts, monuments, which were lying in ruins, perhaps if they had remained, they would have become ruins, broken pillars, as you see in Roman Forum. Perhaps by going to the British Museum, they were preserved for posterity.
We are right in the hustle and bustle of Old Delhi right now. Chor Bazaar originally means selling stolen items and stolen goods. We are right in front of, in the heart of Chor Bazaar right now in Delhi, and it is a miniature version of what I saw in London in British Museum, where all the stolen treasures and artifacts have been kept here. Similarly, so many such stuff is sold here to us Indians. So, yeah. Yeah, these watches really look like they belong to somebody sometime. So look at this. This looks like, obviously, a CCTV camera, which feels like it was ripped off the wall or something.
It is an absolutely perfect analogy about what British museums truly are.
This is a 500-year-old temple. The presiding deity is Balaji. We call him Tirupati Balaji's reincarnation. I exactly do not remember the exact date. It's 23 years old. somewhere in July. Early morning, we got a call from the family member here. He called us and said our temple has been looted, burgled. Small murtis, or the deities we call. 5 murtis were stolen. We were all in tears because for us, it is not the idol. It is the Swami himself, the deity himself, God himself standing there. For us, it is like your child has got kidnapped. How you feel when your small child gets kidnapped? Anurag Saxena is running a group called India Pride Project. India Pride Project is a project wherein they are trying to locate all these smuggled heritage icons, whether the deities or the carved images or statues, or a lot of these heritage images are being smuggled out of different parts of this country. And when I went there, I was surprised to see that not only ours, there are thousands of such images which are being smuggled from this country.
I am Anurag Saxena, co-founder of the India Pride Project, which is an organization to make the case that history belongs to its geography. So what we do is make the case for artifacts and heritage looted from India to be brought back to India. British, when the colonizers say they saved items, the items were safe for centuries before they came. The items are not safe because they broke them down and stole them away. Right, so for somebody to say that the item, I mean, why does a museum today or a private collector value these items? Because they stayed safe for centuries and they are centuries old. When a destroyer believes that he's the savior, when the villain believes he's the hero.
So the puja that was done yesterday is called the Shastra Puja. This is a very ancient ceremony, and this is not an idolization of a physical weapon. It is rather an appeal for light to defeat darkness, for goodness to defeat evil, for right to defeat wrong.
You know, Jarat's case is very interesting. Their family was from modern day, what we call Punjab now. You know, the sword amongst many other objects were taken. That sword is meaningful because it is a part of conquests, fights, resistance, wars that the family engaged in. And rightfully, you know, the heirs of that family should have a right to it.
My name is Jarat Chopra. I'm an international lawyer by training. Being half Indian and half British, of course, these are powerful forces that when I was growing up, I had to learn how to reconcile. But in reconciling them, I understand very well both sides of this equation. My family's been on both sides of this equation. We have to go back 175, 176 years, actually, in which the East India Company had reached the Punjab. What was in the Punjab at the time was a Sikh empire, but the founder of that empire, Maharaja Ranjit Singh, had died in 1839. And as a result of that, that empire was breaking up into different kingdoms. The East India Company had managed to create a compromising set of relations with the northern half of the Punjab, and that left one kingdom in the southern half of the Punjab, which is where my ancestors were ruling at that time. It was inevitable that there would be a conflict between the East India Company and the British forces and this last remaining kingdom, the last part of India to be conquered. And this was the fuse that lit the Second Anglo-Sikh War. But it was an extremely powerful fortress in Multan. It took an enormous amount of material and troops and artillery to be brought to Multan for this siege. And so as the British advanced, they came through the city, came up to the fortress, and then communicated with Mulraj to say it's time to surrender. Ultimately, it came to the day of surrender, and this was the 22nd of January, 1849. Mulraj was brought to the commander's tent, who was General William Whish, and the translator in the tent took his sword and gave it to William Whish as an act of surrender. So Mulraj would be my three greats, great-great-great-grandfather. Then the generations passed, and as the generations passed, there was the search for this particular sword. There was no evidence of it anywhere.
Students, today we will learn A for apple and B for...
Stop. Once again, louder.
Students, today we will learn A for apple, B for ball. Repeat after me. 2 into 2 is equal to 4.
2 into 2 is equals to 4.
Repeat after me. The sun rises in the east.
Sun rises in the east. అక్కడికి వచ్చినాక డైలాగు.
Father, I don't want to learn this irrelevant and meaningless lesson at school. I really miss the life lessons which is taught by our Pandit ji.
You are helpless, my son. The Angrezi Sarkar wants you to learn only this. You have also lost the opportunity to learn the trade of our forefathers.
Okay, good.
The British education system in India. Before that, the education system was very localized. There were great educational institutions right from 5,500 years.
We had more schools and the largest number of literate people in the world. Our literacy rate was more than 90% before the British.
When the British came and introduced this public school system of education, or the missionary schools kind of an education, where everybody were put under one roof and they had to learn science and they had to learn math, and they felt that they had to be developing a rational mind and a scientific mind, and the Indians were thinking in a very backward, superstitious manner.
Education, they concentrated on higher education. They they established 3 presidency colleges, universities, in the Bengal Presidency, in Calcutta, in Madras, and in Bombay. They were the 3 presidents they ruled. And they brought modern education here. If you give them credit, it will say they wanted to put Indians, young Indians, in the mainstream of education.
So they wanted to somehow impose that scientific education. But what happened in the process was that many of the children could not relate to that. Before that, education was very relatable. It was something concerned with their own surroundings, which they could feel, which they could sense, which they could smell. They could relate to it.
Of course, British rule showed the easy-going life. By way of providing jobs and also by giving them the easy way of dress, practices, and lifestyle.
So our schools, our colleges, all the education programs were all colonial trained, including the art schools. Indians were painting on the floors, on their homes, they decorated roofs, they decorated walls. We made beautiful textiles which were exported, beautiful craft material which is today called craft. And all of that changed during the colonial rules. A lot of craft has stopped. Craft that people didn't know existed before. Techniques have stopped because industrialization, machinery, and things that have replaced the traditional form.
So all these things made people to slowly come away from the traditional practices that they have. So that's how the values have been slowly decreased. This is the Jiva premises in Hyderabad. Jiva is a Jier Integrated Vedic Academy, where the research in our Vedic scriptures is done. We are not depriving the students here in getting the regular academia. Here the students focus on the time-tested Vedic scriptures. They study them for sake of two things. One is to know the ancient techniques of the lifestyle, the mysterious world as how it is formed. My beloved brahmacharis, we are performing the Sandhyavandanam 3 times a day. Morning, while sun is rising. Evening, when sun is setting. And afternoon, when sun is in the middle.
We had this infamous minutes of Lord Macaulay, who said the main objective of English education in India is to create a vast set of interpreters, not someone who were rulers. They were just interpreters between them, the rulers, and the millions that they govern, who were Indian in their blood and in their skin color, but they were English in their opinions, in their morals, in their intellect.
As I said earlier, the the education system that they introduced in India somehow has built a very low self-esteem among Indians. It starts with the school. It starts with childhood. So people are always thinking, I'm repeating the sentence, but Indians are always thinking the grass is green on the other side. So that's how even cricket was introduced into India along with the other education curriculum.
Cricket is popular nowhere on this earth. Only the slaves play this game. Our games would have been more energizing, like football, soccer, or hockey, kabaddi, or kho-kho.
Wow, what a six.
We were heroes in these games. But like English language, cricket is also a mark, a signature of ours. A colonial mindset and slavery.
All right, hi everybody. So I am currently in Dover, Kent. And I've come here in search of Lord Clyde Park, where the Sipai's skull was found, the skull of Alam Beg.
So, in the mid-20th century, in a small pub in the English county of Kent, the owners discovered an old skull. As it turned out, it belonged to one of the sepoys who had rebelled against the British in the 19th century. They even managed to find out his fate. The sepoy's name was Alam Beg, and he was executed after the suppression of the rebellion, and his head was brought back to Britain by a British officer. This was a common practice among the English at the time towards Indians who openly opposed London's rule.
All right, guys, I think we might have found it. I think we might have just found it. Here it is. The blue building you see, that used to be the Lord Clyde pub, where the Sipahi skull was found.
When I brought the topic of the Alam Beg's skull that was found in the pub, she was aware of it.
I have Eva with me here, who is now the owner of the place, and yeah. So, do you know about the history of this pub?
Yes, my husband and I bought the building approximately 9 years ago. Once we moved in, we were told at some point that somebody mentioned to us that it had a history then apart from the mutiny, and that because of the name, somebody had back in way back in history, in the early days of the pub, had presented the landlord with the skull of Alan Beg, who was involved in the Indian mutiny and was caught and punished by being fired from a cannon.
At first, she was very hesitant to give an interview. And the reason that she told me was that history is history. It's gone. It's the past. It's dead. But it happened. And it happened. Nobody can change it. So why discuss about that? Why talk about that? I think there's a lot of amnesia in the Britain culture about the colonial past they have.
There was a continuous stream of an armed struggle, a violent and a very bloody armed struggle as well, right from what was known as the first uprising in 1857 till 1946, when we had a naval and an army mutiny. So throughout this entire stream, there were lots of people who were the revolutionaries and the revolutionary movement in India.
Ready, go!
Action!
Where they're attacking us from? It's not possible to locate them, sir. It's a damn jungle. What the hell is this? You shameless creatures! How long you will serve your own brothers, foreign masters?
Full dialogue. Your shameless creatures.
You shameless creatures! How long you will serve your own foreign masters and kill your own brothers? How long?
This is small but significant fight. No foreigner, however mighty he might be, let's fight with them and take our lands back from them. Jal Jangal Jameen!
Jal Jangal Jameen! Jal Jangal Jameen! Jal Jangal Jameen!
As you can see, it's quite touristy. A lot of people come here. When I went to the British museums and the museum, I didn't see people who are really there to learn anything. They were just there, in my opinion, to as tourists, to just see in the different sections of the countries what kind of artifacts are made, because they have different styles. I don't see a point of the artifacts that belong to us be kept there in London or Britain as an excuse for people to learn history.
Oh, I think we are in front of the most controversial artifact, in my opinion, in the British Museum, which is the sword and the rings and perfume of Tipu Sultan. It is a reminder of the colonialism that occurred in India. Here, if you read these descriptions, you will find that they have very explicitly written that this sword and the ring was actually taken from his dead body after he was killed.
Ancestors protected these objects with their blood. They lost their lives for it. You know, they've been praying to and giving respect to these objects for centuries. The least we can do is convince other nations to give these objects back to us.
At the time of my grandparents' death, they had said, well, now the search for this sword is your duty. I've been looking for the sword for quite some time. And it was in October of 2018. It was a time when the Hindus believe the ancestors come back to visit for a 2-week period. I saw that there was an announcement for an auction, and it was the auction of General Whish's medals. But in the story was a piece of information saying that, in fact, he had kept this particular sword. It had passed down in the family, and one of his descendants in 1965 had donated it to the Royal Artillery Institution. I contacted the Royal Artillery and said, "Do you have this sword?" And they took about 3 months, and they finally confirmed that they have it, and they were able to locate it. And it was in a case that hadn't been opened, it seems, for a very long time. And anyway, they confirmed that they had it. They sent me some photographs.
You have a copy?
So what is important for my family and this sword? There is a concept in Hinduism called pitrudosh. This is the idea that your ancestors may have done something bad, or something bad may have been done to them, but you as descendants carry the karma of those events and those acts. And so there is a disturbance that enters into the family. In other words, it's like a collective traumatic consequence of events. And in order to put those things to rest, you need to either perform certain ceremonies, or in this case, the return of the sword is really about putting to rest the effects of history. So there'll be individuals in my family who will have risen to a certain success, and then it just dissipates. One can see this repeating pattern of individuals who rise and then fall, rise and then fall, rise and then fall extremely quickly. And so this is a very typical karmic consequence called pitrudosh, in which basically the ancestors are trying to get your attention to fix the situation so you can move on peacefully.
What do you do in social and emotional learning?
Well, the questions are like, each station has questions, and the question for social emotional learning is, who had been your friends in 5th grade? Who are your allies? But we didn't share social emotional learning because some kids felt unsafe because they didn't have friends, and so they couldn't share about friends because they didn't have friends.
Action.
Dilakji? Dilakji?
Swamiji, my great fortune, I could meet you, Swamiji.
So, the Kesari is imprisoned.
How can I unite the society divided into multiple castes, creeds, and communities?
Tilakji, be steady in your chosen path. The obstacles will vanish. Currently, Indians lack a sense of belonging. You need a strong platform to unite them. A symbol which creates a feeling of oneness. Ganpati will provide you with that.
There are actually many streams of the Indian freedom struggle. One common narrative that's been held is that it was largely a non-violent movement. Of course, the pressure that Mahatma Gandhi, the Congress, put on the British Raj through moral persuasion, through ensuring that, through the non-violent movement actually rankle the conscience of the colonial oppressor.
And then Tolstoy gave them a formula. This is 1908, before Gandhi came on the scene. He said, don't join their bureaucracy. Don't join their army. He said, that has been enslaving you. Don't join their courts. If you can do non-cooperation on these 3 sectors, you will paralyze the rulers.
It did not happen before Gandhi because we needed a Gandhi to actually put us all together. We needed a Gandhi who could give us a simple message which even an aristocrat could understand and even the poorest of poor could understand. So if you see how Gandhi communicated I mean, one of the greatest examples of this communication was the Salt March.
માહિતીમાં એવું કે અહીંયા એમ કે અંગ્રેજ લોકો આપણા આજે આ ઘરની અંદર કામ કરતા એ લોકો પાસે અત્યાચાર કરતા એમ ને લાઠીચાર્જ કરતા ને લડાઈ કરીને લોકોને ઘાયલ કરતા ને એ રીતે બધા જુલમ ગુજારતા એમ કે એવા અમારા બાપ દાદા અમને વાત કરતા એમ કોઈ ઘોડા દોડાવે પછી ઘાયલ કરે એ બધી અમને માહિતી થોડીક બાપ દાદા લોકો આપતા એમ એટલું અમે જાણીએ બાકી ગાંધીજી અહીંયા છે.
So Mahatma Gandhi, they say, took a pinch of salt and broke the empire's back. And how did he do that? He took 78 of his followers from Ahmedabad and walked 241 miles to the sea coast to a village called Dandi. And in these 241 miles, when he reached the coast of Dandi, he had 100,000 Indians with him. And go on hitting somebody, but if the person is not hitting back, your conscience at some point of time will kick in and say, what am I doing? Am I doing the right thing? And I think that's what he did to the British.
India became independent on the 15th of August, 1947. Whilst we were moving towards independence of India, we were also moving towards the partition of India. That was a terrible legacy of the British when they were here in India as rulers, because one of the things they did was divide and rule. So they did create a kind of schism between the Hindus and the Muslims whilst they were ruling this country. And that meant that the British felt that they could no longer control the situation. They brought in Mountbatten, and he was the last viceroy of India, and he needed to do something, and he thought that partition was the only way out. So then he brought in a judge from the UK called Sir Cyril Radcliffe, who came in, who had never been to India before. He had no idea of the country at all, and he was given 5 weeks to divide the country. And within 5 weeks, he takes a decision and he just draws up the lines. Mountbatten could not tell anybody what the boundaries were, you know, because it was only between him and Radcliffe, and of course the British government back home in London. So Pakistan was born on the 14th of August, and India became independent on the 15th of August. But the terms of the partition of the country were only announced on the 17th of August. So it was a free India and Pakistan that learnt about what were the terms of the partition, but the people were completely unprepared. And people have to leave. They have to leave their homes. They're being forced out of their homes because there are riots all around them. People are looting homes. They're driving people out. What happens in a situation like this when the nation is unprepared for it, and that is what had happened. The British left a very unprepared nation. They lost so much. They lost lives, they lost homes, they lost their status, they became refugees overnight in the new country that they were forced to go to. It was also a division of everything, right from the armies to the cricket team, to music, to art, to culture. Everything was divided, you know, on the basis of religion. So this is a very beautiful sculpture given to us on loan by a Kashmiri artist, Veer Munshi. And it represents, as you can see, the whole story of migration, how difficult it is. Because this is a horse painted in the traditional style of Kashmir, in paper mache style. But on his back, he's carrying bones, different bones of different parts of a human's body. And I think that is very symbolic and something which we must remember, that when people migrate, they carry many things with them.
Can you raise the jumps a bit? My name is Jarat Chopra. I'm 11 years old and I have a lot of family history.
So she is a descendant of Punjabi kings Yes, correct. She's the last in line, or the latest. So there's a straight male line from the Diwan Mulraj Chopra, from the Raja of Multan. That was the owner of the sword. And in that male line that goes down to Jarat, she's then the last. There's no boy.
There's a part of India called Punjab, and there was Mulraj, who had his sword there, and he was fighting with a sword, and he had to give the sword up, and he went to prison. And we want the sword back because we don't want any more bad things. We don't want the past trauma. We just want to have the sword in a safe place.
I went about seeking the return of it, and I basically requested it. And that was very clearly and rather abruptly rejected.
Well, certainly, he was very, very disappointed. And I think especially at a time when we've gone through quite some transformation generally in the world, where we've become much more accepting of different cultures and different people, and the world has become a more diverse place. And I think also the discussion of actually returning objects that were taken in the colonial context has become, a very relevant discussion.
So this is the initial letter from me requesting the return of the sword. And this was the response, which after its explanation ends with the words, "In conclusion, I must advise you that the regiment will not agree to the return or sale of the Talwar sword and considers this matter closed," which of course for me it is not. They basically explained that this was a war trophy, and as a war trophy, as a material object, it was important to them to celebrate their victories of the past, which of course was adding insult to injury for the family that had suffered in that very brutal siege. And in addition to that, they said, well, if we give this back, why shouldn't we give everything else back? And if we don't give everything else back, why should we give this back? And to me, that's a very false logic. If I go into someone's house and I take something and I leave the house and I say, look, more people will benefit from this, from your possessions, because I can put them on display. Is that going to be a very satisfactory answer for you? You just want it back. It came from your house. So I don't think that Britain, as its museums have done, can self-appoint themselves as the keepers of human civilization in terms of these objects. It is not about changing history. It is not about changing the facts of history. There was a siege, there was a defeat. That's a fact. But we can change our experience of that history. And I have made it very clear to the Royal Artillery that the family continues to suffer a consequence from that. My daughter will say she doesn't want any family curse to be passed on to her. And this sword has gone through an enormously traumatic experience. I think the answer is for this sword to be taken to the kind of place that Mulraj himself would have wanted, which is basically a Hindu temple, for the sword to have a degree of respect, to be treated with respect, and for that peace to come.
So I've just met these two fellow Indians who I spoke to about this cause. They're just happy to be there, that the artifacts that they're seeing are best appreciated by being at the British Museum.
I've been proud to see a lot of our stuff here, especially coming back. We're all from South India, so I'm from Shimla and he's from Kumbakoda. I learned more here about the temples and about Lord Shiva than what I would.
Yeah, cool. That's one. Yeah, get it.
Sure. That's an advantage of maybe just coming here. Out there. Yeah.
But I think it's just a lack of awareness. It is not just about a touristic viewing of the artifacts. It's actually about history. It's actually about the rightful ownership of each artifact. And they should rightfully be in India.
Okay. Give me 1 minute. Okay.
Go to that room, Action.
What I would recommend is let UK send their heritage to India, and I can guarantee there'll be more eyeballs than the British Museum. The world needs to understand that history belongs to its geography. When people talk of remnants of British colonialism only in positive light, right? I think we have to be fair and balanced and talk about British colonialism, you know, what it left back.
Still you go out, you ask any English-speaking person, convent school educated, and they would give you 10 reasons why the British rule was good for India. It takes time to show them the truth.
Let's say if I call my neighbor's mother is more beautiful than my mother, so I start calling her mom because she's more beautiful than my mother, though the British have left us. Still, a cultural blind worship is actually putting your power in somebody else's hands and allowing them to control you. So this misuse should stop.
I'm speaking to you in English, and I've learned that as my first language in school in my growing up years, and later on itself is an acknowledgement of the fact that we've been colonized. The fact that many Indians cannot even, probably speak prolifically in their original languages, in their regional languages, their own mother tongues, is an acknowledgement of the pernicious effect of colonialism. British gene is quite inextricably come into the Indian, DNA today.
See, to be honest with you, as I said, we are 5,000 years old. If you look at our history, Britain probably is the last 200 years. But if you take 5,000 years into account, almost every part of the world has visited India. So I think not only there would be a gene of the English people over here, but I think the whole world comes here.
I would ask this nation to remember their history and to tell your own narrative yourself. Don't be dependent on foreign historians to tell you who you are and what you did.
India today is reborn. There's a new energy. There's a new buzz, and I see it around me. And I don't think 10 years ago I actually felt this change, and it's a huge shift. We are a young nation of young people who have a lot of energy. So yes, we're going to make a difference.
The empire brought many emissaries. They were the traders who came to plunder and enrich themselves with the gold of India. Others came to offer the challenge of a new civilization and opened India to the wonders of the West. In time, the conquerors were touched by the grandeur of India and were conquered in return.